The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, where we're talking about the living in a world where the wired, tired, and technology converge. Each week, we talk with HR and business thought leaders, and I'm your host, Ira Wolf, and I'm here with my co-host, Keith Compagna. We're actually in the same room for a change, and in the same country, same state. Our sponsors today are JobVite and Success Performance Solutions. You know, one of the best parts of hosting the podcast, I think we're up to 25 for this, is having the opportunity to interview some of the most talented people, and today's no exception. What's even better is that when a guest is a good friend and colleague, because it seems we're always so busy, we just never have time to catch up. Without making an appointment. So these are sometimes these are just catch-up calls for me, and they're fun. So today we're going to be doing two things. I'm going to catch up with Kerry Goyette, who's been a good friend and colleague for the last few years, and we're going to discuss her brand new book, Non-Obvious Guide to Emotional Intelligence. And while emotional intelligence has become somewhat of a buzzword, we'll definitely talk why it is not. Keith, you're going to love talking with Kerry. I know you just had a minute or two before the show started. And we're going to talk a lot about why it's so important today in talent selection and career development. People making changes. You're going through a transition now, and people just don't realize it's important. They think it's like, oh yeah, I took this test or I took this course or, and I scored well. I mean, it's much more than that. You know, to me, it reflects the reality, and we talk about it almost every week, and maybe even every conversation we have, is that how the very definition of work is being redefined. And, coming from the software industry, I could tell you that a lot of the end users I spoke with are challenged with the idea that they have to rethink the way they do their jobs. Whether or not they were aware of the influences software can have on them. It's really interesting to be a fly on the wall time and time again, and watch how people come to terms with the idea that they have to rethink the way they're going to do their work, or don't come to terms. That's a huge issue. Just got back. I had a week off, and you asked me. Your leading question was how was it? Did you relax? And yeah, I did. And I did take one or two calls, and I checked emails and things. But when you're not doing it within the confines of four walls, and you're overlooking a deep blue, literally a deep blue sea. It's better. It was definitely better. But I caught up. There were two books that I wanted to read, and one was about artificial intelligence in HR by Ben Eubanks. Nice. Really good guy. I met him at the Sherm Talent. And they picked up his book, and the way he writes, the topic and everything just resonated. So I actually almost read it twice because I've got my Sherm conference presentation coming up where there's no H and how to keep the H in HR, and that seems to be a growing popular topic. I've had a couple people that have actually reached out to me about doing that again. And then I read another book that I had read last year at Convergence, which I'm going back to Cornerstone, and that was about technology and humanity. How do we keep that? And kind of a long way around to what you were just saying is where people are really struggling with, as you know, and Kerry writes about it in her book too, about VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, about the world we live in. And people are trying to come to terms with that. And it sort of becomes, hey, I'm not going to use technology. We got to disconnect. We got to break away from technology, which is going to be impossible to do. Correct. And then the other flip side is people who are always connected, and technology has become their life. So part of this conversation becomes how do we use technology efficiently and resourcefully and use it as tools to improve our humanity.
Sure.
Rather than replacing that.
This is such a mind trip for me, because this is the exact thing that life work integration is doing. Because what I see is the need for most individuals not to read a book and not to listen to necessarily a podcast, but ours are available on all of the listening agencies. But the reality is that people are it's hard to change. And my life work integration, the concept, the company I'm putting together, the consulting I'm putting together has everything to do with give me the chance to work with a group of your employees and help them develop what it's like to integrate their life and their work, which is technology and no technology, and habits and new habits, without being afraid and recognizing now's the best time ever that you could do it.
And to make that transition, I mean, this part where everybody says, "Oh, I'm not going to use technology," or "Technology is the best," and and allows me to stay connected, and I can be on a beach and still be, in business. The reality is how do you blend those? And emotion, and it's a great segue, because emotional intelligence is this buzzword that's thrown around, and it's like, oh, that's only for leaders, or how do we develop more emotional intelligence? Well, it's much more than taking a course and graduating with a certificate and saying, oh, now I got it.
Right.
I mean, it's much more than just becoming smarter, and that's why I'm kind of really excited when I found that Kerry actually approached me a couple months ago to kind of review the book and write an endorsement for it, and it's just a practical way to do it. So we're going to talk a lot about that.
Nice.
And now I guess is as good a time as any to kind of bring Kerry in. Kerry, I've met Kerry a number of years ago through one of my assessment groups, and through another colleague of mine. And we sort of hit it off instantly, became friends, and we've worked together on a number of different, projects and things over the years. She has a company. She's president and founder of Aperio Consulting out in Missouri, but she works nationally as well as, as we do. She's also a TEDx speaker. She was a TEDx sponsor,
Nice.
At one point. And no, she had an event. We'll have to check in on that. And we've done a lot of work. Her and I have done a lot of work together.
How long have you known each other?
I don't know.
Well, Kerry, are you out there?
Yeah, I am. Thank you guys both for having me. Yeah, I think it's been about 7 years.
Yeah. I was going to say, so I don't think it was quite 10, but I knew it was somewhere
between now and then.
Yeah, in there. Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. I think we also met through the quality of motivation, where I remember that was the reason we did that, and we've done some work on that, and another fascinating, theory and I guess skill set that people need to develop. So, Kerry, I mean, welcome to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to be on the show.
So your new book, Non-Obvious Guide to Emotional Intelligence.
I love that title.
When you kind of sent me the draft to kind of review, I guess I'm not surprised, because I knew you were looking. This has been one of your interests. But what prompted you? Why did you choose this to write about when there's so many other things I know you do and you're talented in? Why emotional intelligence?
I get asked to speak all around the world. I've spoken in Barbados and Austria on the topic of emotional intelligence. So I've realized it's a very requested topic. And as you mentioned earlier, it's quite the buzzword in the media. But what I often find, either in, as I'm doing these keynotes or I'm working with clients, it's a buzzword, and it's a concept that they affiliate with and say, yeah, we know we need it. We know we need to increase our emotional intelligence. But then when I ask them, what does that mean? It's funny. They all of a sudden start to kind of trip over their feet. They'll talk about empathy, or it means this. And so I realize that they don't quite understand the full impact of emotional intelligence. But not only that, just how critical it is, especially in this new environment that we're going into, how critical emotional intelligence is going to be. And because I'm passionate about the subject, because I've seen so many leaders be impacted, whether it be negatively or positively, due to their emotional intelligence. I've seen a lot of fallen leaders that have been fired, and a lot of employees that just have really struggled over time because of low emotional intelligence. And then to contrast that, I've seen people that have really thrived even in this very tough environment. And so it just became something that I was passionate about. And then I wanted to break it down. I mean, that's where the non-obvious piece comes in. I wanted to break it down and make it simple, but also very compelling as to why it matters and why it's so important for all of us, not just leaders, to work on it.
So I mean, and I don't know if you have an answer for this, but why do you think people actually call you and want a keynote on it? I mean, obviously there's got to be some pain, some interest there. Is it just that, hey, we read about it and it was in Harvard Business Review or, New York Times or Wall Street Journal, and we think we should have this? Or is there actually a deeper rooted kind of sense or need to understand it? What's prompting all this?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, for some people, I get asked just because it's kind of the latest and greatest. It's the interesting buzzword. We want to hear about emotional intelligence. And then for others, I think it goes a little bit deeper. I think they're seeing the need that it's not just something that would be nice to have, and that would be great if we worked on that. I think other people are starting to see that, oh my gosh, we have problems. I mean, we have significant issues because we don't have effective leadership capacity built within our organization. And here's how it's impacting us. We're experiencing high turnover rates. One of my clients got serious about it when their turnover rates quadrupled. And so I would say it's a little bit of both. They're just panicking. Some are panicking and some are excited about the next new thing.
So we probably have a lot of people that are maybe often the people that are sitting in your audience, and they've heard the term, they're interested in it, they accept it, but they're not sure exactly what it is. So, just for everybody, I mean, it's been around a while. I mean, this isn't new. This isn't necessarily it's a buzzword now, and it's 2019.
Right.
But, Daniel Goleman really popularized it in the early 90s. So it's been something that's stuck around, but maybe hasn't, a lot of people are interested, but maybe now it's really important. But what are the stages? I mean, how do you describe emotional intelligence to the layman, to the person on the street? What is it, and how does somebody improve it?
Okay. So emotional intelligence, or what we'll also call EQ, which stands for emotional quotient, is really defined as the ability to identify, assess, and control your own emotions, influence the emotions of others, and that of groups. And so when you think about kind of the core elements that go into emotional intelligence, you've got the self, you've got others, or the social component, and then the piece that I brought in with my book that is often missing from emotional intelligence conversations is also the environment. And so when you put those three together, that really is kind of the core element of emotional intelligence. How people typically build or increase their emotional intelligence is it usually starts with the self. So, again, that's around self-awareness. How effectively can I adapt and control my own emotions? And then it goes to the social. How can I better influence and persuade and get buy-in with my teams? And then, again, ideally what we're trying to get at, especially with this environment, is start to look at the environment and determine what skills are actually needed. Everybody doesn't need to be high in everything. For instance, a surgeon, when they have a body on the table, you do not want them to have high empathy. And so in that environment, you want them to have low empathy and be very analytical. But the problem is when that surgeon walks into the door and greets their partner, that's where the problems come in. They sometimes don't shift, knowing this is a different environment. This is a real person and a loved one. Now I need to express more empathy. And so the better that we can get at reading our environment and adapting to what is needed in that environment, that's kind of the real kind of, I would say, the trifecta of emotional intelligence to be able to get to that point.
So you had a couple great quotes in this book. One was, it wasn't quotes, it was stats. One was that 70% of people believe that they are in the top 10% of their peer group when it comes to self-awareness, which I always say, the first thing is, and it goes back even before Daniel Goleman into Stephen Covey, is know your first seek to understand yourself. Right. And, everybody says, oh, yeah, I took an assessment. Yeah, I remember doing a Myers-Briggs and a DISC, and I had a coach once. And, yeah, I'm really aware of myself now. So, but, it's that overestimation. It's that overconfidence of I've done it. But, reality, they're not very good at it. A second part of that was even, I don't know if it's the corollary, I don't remember if it was the same person or not, or the same study, but 82% believe they were in the top 20% of their peer group in self-awareness, and 98.5% believe they were in the top half. So, it's like the 1%ers are in the lower 50%.
Everyone's unhappy and everyone's okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
what does all that mean?
Yeah, so there's this whole, so even when you come down to the root, the very basic, the rudimentary aspect of emotional intelligence, there seems to be a disconnect in that self-awareness area. So when you're dealing with leaders or anyone, and they approach you, and they say, we want to improve this, but we don't think this is our problem. Is we want them to show more empathy, but the self-awareness. We think everybody's self-aware because last year we hired a coach for everybody. How do where do you go from there?
That's a good question. So yeah, everybody thinks they're way more self-aware than they actually are. And so that's where I use assessments and 360s. So I have them do an assessment, and I can look at their level of self-awareness and then also gather feedback through a 360, or I will, do it manually. I'll just go in and ask for feedback of their teams. And with the two of those, then I sit down with the leader and we look over their self-assessment, what they reported, and how does that compare with the 360? What are others saying about them? And so that's how I'm trying to bring their self-awareness much closer to an accurate picture of self-awareness. And I will say that first stage is pretty tough for leaders. I've worked with, VPs of an NFL team, really like ambitious go-getter leaders, and it just about brought them down to their knees. They're like, man, I knew this was going to be hard. I had no idea how hard it was. So there's a little bit of a painful process sometimes going through the self-awareness piece, but once they get there, what's really cool is now that they know it, now there's something that they can do about it. And so I spend quite a bit of time on that self-awareness piece, because if I can't get them past that, it's going to be really hard to build any skills beyond that.
That makes perfect sense to me. I was just about to ask you, is there a general tipping point that you recognize that people get to, like your clients will reach?
And what do you mean by that? In what context?
You mentioned the quick story that you referenced about someone saying, "Oh, I knew this was going to be that aha moment," where someone says, "Maybe I'm not as aware as I think I am." Is there a specific element that you see that resonates with most people, or is it a one-on-one thing?
I think it depends. It's probably more of an individual aspect. But I would say, most people resonate with the fact that they want to do some skill building in a particular area. And I would say most people also will admit that they're not exactly where they need to be to get there, that they don't think that they're all fully, self-actualized. But I think the disconnect is typically on what actually needs to be improved. And that's why it's really fascinating when you get the 360 feedback. Some things they will say, yeah, I knew that. I'm not surprised by that. And other things, that were just completely in their blind spot, that they didn't realize. And those aspects are what's probably the most painful for them to realize.
Sure.
So, you and I have come up through the ranks of DISC, and you talk about values in the assessment. I'm introducing Keith to those currently. And where he's headed with work-life integration, life-work integration. I'll get that right.
I have to correct everybody.
Yeah. So life-work integration, but life before work, right?
Yes, because that's what matters.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned the 360. So people may or may not be aware of that, where you'd go out and you ask a lot of peers and your bosses and how you think you approach it. I assume the other assessments you use are the DISC and the values. Is that, am I correct?
Yeah, it somewhat depends on what I'm looking for, but yeah, most often I use the DISC and the values, and then the quality of motivation questionnaire.
Okay, so you have. So I'm going to go back again. Still struggling a little bit with that question I had. You have this leader who comes in and he goes, one is I need to fix everybody else except me. And the rest of my team, because I've been coached and I've been mentored and, I've been through this, and I've had 20 years experience, so I know how the world works. I mean, if I was the client calling you and that was, and I'm saying that, that you got, I want you to come in and fix my team. What do you do? What's your approach? How do you go about doing that? Which assessments do you use, or what's the conversation look like, or, what are the steps? Because I think this is where companies struggle, because they think they can go out and they hire a consultant and they do a half-a-day session on emotional intelligence and now everybody's better.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't work that way. It's a process. It's a process, not a program. And so in order to build emotional intelligence, there's definitely key learnings, but there's also insight, reflection, and then there's the, implementation of these new skills. How can I try this? That's an issue that I get with almost every client. They always identify somebody or another team or somebody else other than themselves as the problem. And so,
I've said that years ago. I don't want to forget this. I don't know how many times, and I don't do a lot of, that type of the team building, but I don't know how many times I get called about team building. And my first question with that is that who are you trying to fix? Because most companies didn't proactively go out and say, hey, things are going really well. Let's do a team building exercise. It's usually there's somebody or some buddies on the team that aren't getting along and they don't know how to deal with them, but they don't want to single them out, so they call it team building.
Right.
And I sense that emotional intelligence sort of comes into the mix. It's like, oh, we did team building and that didn't work, so let's reach out to emotional intelligence now. Maybe that'll fix it.
Right. And that's what a lot of people will do. But again, it's a process. It's not a pill. And so I will often work with the team, but will identify certain people if they have, particular issues, or they're very low in emotional intelligence, or the problem is the leader. When I work with the team, you're part of the system. And so I always, in fact, if I get asked to coach, I require that I work with the entire team, because people are not in a vacuum. They are part of a system. And so that's where you can take one high performer, move them, and put them on another team, and whether or not that environment is set up for them to succeed will determine whether or not they succeed or fail. And so I do think working with the team approach is good, but then you have to work with individual aspects within that. So certain leaders may have, like the leader may have certain competencies that they're low on and need to improve on. And then the team may be avoiding conflict. There's all kinds of issues that manifest because of that. So I actually work on all sides, and I found that when I do that, you can get results much faster. I worked with a team that was falling apart. 3 of their top performers were getting ready to leave. They said they'd had enough. It was going to be $1.3 million in turnover costs. And in 6 weeks, we had the team stabilized. And that was partly working with the entire team, although a lot of the issues were stemming from the new leader that they put in charge of that team.
Well, it goes to show the value of getting someone like yourself in there so that you can maximize that new leader's potential. I'm going to change lanes a little bit on you here, but not too much, I promise. You talk about how diverse the audience in your classes might be, or the clients that you speak with. Have you noticed any differences or had experiences with what I call the new digital natives as compared to the Generation X and maybe baby boomers you work with? Do you see any difference in the way that they respond? Any patterns with regard to generations?
Oh yeah. We're diving a lot into the generational kind of diversity and the needs of the different generations. One of the issues is, and I know you've talked about this a lot, but with the boomers exiting the workforce, we've got a real leadership gap crisis because Gen X only represents about 28% of the workforce. And so there just aren't that many of them. Now, Gen Xers, we're kind of, I'm part of Gen X, so we're hardcore. We're all about efficiency. We want it done and we want it done now. And unfortunately, we're managing a lot of the millennials and then the Gen Zers that are starting to enter the workforce. And that doesn't always sit well with the millennials. And so I don't know how many times I hear leaders that are just like, I can't figure out how to manage this younger generation. And they're digital natives. And so, there's just a lot of opportunity. And I will say the younger generation, those that are the digital natives, I think you have to bring in technology to the training. It's something I did resist initially, but I realize it's such a part of their life, and we need to acknowledge that. The key is, as you talked about before, we have to keep it as a tool, and it has to be helpful. And so we're bringing a lot more technology into it. We're doing, surveys right during the training that they can do on their phone, and so they love being able to have that instantaneous feedback. And so, the other thing we're noticing with the younger generation is they're used to posting on social media and getting immediate feedback. And again, our older generations are not great with offering timely feedback. So a lot of younger employees are leaving just simply because they're not getting enough feedback in the cultures that they're in. So we're just seeing a lot of interesting differences between the generations, and so it's been fun to kind of navigate some of those issues.
Yes. Hey, just a reminder to everybody, you're listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Our guest today is Kerry Goyette from Aperio Consulting, and she is the author of a new book, The Non-Obvious Guide to Emotional Intelligence, which is really something that, everybody should be listening to this, and really a skill, an ability that everyone is going to need to develop. As a reminder, we're also recording live today. You can call us at 561-623-9429. That's 561-623-9429. With questions, comments, what's going on in your mind, especially if you have something for Kerry about emotional intelligence. And we will be right back in 2 minutes. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the common derailers. And we're going to continue our discussion about emotional intelligence and what's keeping people from moving forward.
Behind everything you're searching for is something you're actually looking for. When you search with the Real Yellow Pages, you get more than a contractor. You get a whole new curb appeal. It's not just getting directions to a dry cleaner with YP.com. It's rescuing an old favorite from the back of the closet. And it's more than finding a locksmith with YP.com on your mobile. It's getting to sleep in your own bed. Whatever it might be, there are more ways to search and more ways to find exactly what you're looking for with the Real Yellow Pages, YP.com, and YP.com on your mobile, only from AT&T.
What's up, everyone? This is Keith from the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, powered by JobVite. JobVite knows career paths are made by people, not by open job requisitions. JobVite's platform ties recruitment marketing directly to applicant tracking and onboarding, creating continuous candidate engagement that effectively connects recruiters with qualified passive candidates. Used by over 50,000 recruiters placing over 1 million jobs, JobVite's platform impacts every company in every industry. Check us out at jobvite.com.
Listen carefully. Up to 9 out of 10 job candidates visiting your company career page leave before completing an application. You heard that right. 90% of candidates who want to apply for a job at your company don't. That's just plain crazy, especially in today's tight labor market. Candidate experience matters. Stop turning candidates away. Let Success Performance Solutions help. Call us at 800-803-4303 or register at successperformancesolutions.com/W4CY. Schedule a no-obligation consultation and get special access to insider tips to recruit faster and hire smarter.
Welcome back to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I'm your host, Ira Wolf. I'm here with my co-host, Keith Compagna, and our special guest today is Kerry Goyette from Aperio Consulting. We're talking about emotional intelligence, millennials, VUCA, growth mindset, a whole lot of things. Hey, during the break, we got on a discussion about, sort of a continuation about what we were talking about before, and about the leader, an older leader calling up and wants to know how to fix the young team or resist the technology. Why can't we do it the other way? Kerry, I got a question for you on the other end of it. And Keith experiences a little bit of this and been around a lot of startups. You get some, I won't say necessarily young is the right one, but that's who's usually doing the startups. Late 20s, early 30s. We're talking about some big dollars, got a great concept, starts to put a team together, and then the ego. I mean, one is, I guess, some of it's low self-awareness. It may be lack of empathy. Certainly they've got a lot of good things going for them. Focus and intelligence. And but have you worked with any startups, with any entrepreneurs, and what's your, what are you seeing there? Do they have a, or the more, well, I guess, what was it, Travis from Uber, who got booted out, and we can all identify the ones that probably have gotten, too big for their britches, eventually got booted out. But what do you, are you doing any work in the startup space?
We are actually. We just finished a pilot study on entrepreneurs, looking at if we could predict if there were predictive factors of success or failure with the actual entrepreneur. And so we actually went in and looked at 120 different traits. And what came out of the study was that there were 8 predictive traits. 3 were predictive of success, but more interestingly, 5 were predictive of failure. And so we partnered with an angel investing group. They were so excited. The study has actually been getting a lot of attention because we're not really having that conversation. We're talking about we need more innovation, we need more startups, and we know that, entrepreneurs typically are creative. And that certainly is one aspect of it, but we're really not talking about what is it that they're bringing to the table that can potentially cause them to derail or fail. Right. And that the derailers actually came out as much more highly predictive than anything else.
What were some of the elements, if you could share with us, what are some of the areas that someone might want to know that they need to work on? You just mentioned 5 factors.
Yeah, so part of it was around impulsivity, so their ability to build and maintain relationships over time. The fact that they will actually put a group of advisors around them and listen, actually listen to their advice. When they go in and guard their ideas too much, or their ego gets in the way and they have they're way more overconfident and underestimate the situations. All of that impacts their ability to problem solve and move the startup forward. Because as you know, you don't have brand recognition, and you hit a lot of challenges along the way that you have to, what I call, MacGyver your way out. Sure. And so the entrepreneurs that showed up in the study that do this well, they act like that MacGyver. They're willing to listen to advice. They try, they test, they course correct. They're just these really amazing, kind of tenacious, resourceful problem solvers. And so, in the study, what came out are all of those things that got in the way of that type of problem solving.
Nice. Well, and I know you talk about that a little bit. It is, obviously one of my kind of, I won't say a niche, but sort of the passion was VUCA. The volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That was my, my TED Talk, and it sort of launched the book, and it really describes the world we live in, and not that emotional intelligence is the solution, but the counter, I won't say the counter side to, or the antidote I guess, to VUCA was, vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. And I know you mentioned those in the book, not necessarily vision as much, but vision's probably having high self-awareness, but, certainly understanding, clarity, and agility as being important factors. Were those some of the traits that you measured? Were you looking for agility? Was that one of those top 3 traits that predicted entrepreneurs who were successful?
Yes. Yeah. And so that agility, and I'm getting asked for that. I work with some high-tech companies, and they're finding in their world that agility piece, that mental agility is starting to be just incredibly crucial in order to kind of move the company forward, in order to be able to leverage more innovation within the companies. And that's a great thing. Millennials are incredibly innovative. And so the key is, are we creating the environment so that we can get some of that innovation out of them? But that mental agility is the key. And so I've actually gone in and done training on mental agility to be able to increase it so that we can leverage more of that innovative talent that we have.
Well, and you've heard my spiel before. I mean, one of the things is about curiosity. I mean, it's not only being creative, but it's about being curious. So you can be creative without being curious, which people always find that a little bit puzzling. So one of the things you and I share, have used a similar assessment that measures how curious, actually two assessments, and it's how curious is somebody. And it just blows me away that there's so many people that sort of read the headlines, take things at face value. They have a few trusted sources. That's their scope, and as long as they've heard it from someone, then it must be true. And so curiosity is a big piece. I mean, is that one of the areas that you're working on to develop? Because I know you also wrote about something I wrote about in my book. Fixed mindset, the fixed versus the growth mindset. So this all. I mean, all this sort of goes back, and it starts making sense to us. Hopefully, it makes sense to the people that are listening.
Sure.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm doing a lot with curiosity, because you're exactly right. When our brain is actually not very good at looking at data and then being able to make sense out of that data. And we like to think that we're a lot more logical and we use all this great cognitive reasoning, but our brains were not designed for that. They were designed for survival. And so that's why we can be easily tricked. And that's why our brains are lazy too. We want to be efficient. And so we will often just say, okay, well, I heard somebody that touted that information or that statistic, then it must be true. So, there's a believed fact, and then there's a checked fact. And so most of us go off of believed facts that we never have actually checked. And so we just have to understand that our brain has biases, and that it wasn't meant to decode data and make sense out of it. We actually have to train it to be able to do that. So curiosity, diving into data and information a little bit more deeply, and understanding, being acutely aware of our biases and where we're going to get tripped up, actually can make a pretty significant difference in decision making.
So you mentioned, agility, curiosity. I mean, you mentioned in your study that there were 3. What did we cover those? That there were 3 traits that were good predictors?
The interesting thing, and you'll love this, Keith, is around work-life integration. We think that as an entrepreneur, we have to burn the midnight oil. And I'm not arguing that as an entrepreneur, yes, you absolutely do work hard. But those that just completely burn themselves out or run it too hard, it's actually predictive of failure. So there's a little bit of this kind of, I think, misconception around entrepreneurs that you just are working constantly. And I would say that's probably going to be a recipe for failure. And again, successful entrepreneurs obviously work hard, but they view it more as integration. And so they're having fun, and they figure out a way to integrate it, because it just starts to become who they are. And so, again, this is where the younger generation has done better than the older generation, because they may go out and take the dog for a walk for 20 minutes, work a little, they're just better at kind of taking these snippets of time and using them. And research is showing that they're actually, they can actually be more productive than the older generation that thinks it has to be in this really big block of time, and that we have to, work 60, 70, 80 hours a week.
I know you've known Ira for a good while, several years. This conversation is absolutely blowing my mind. I just watched a TED Talk, Adam Grant, and he talked exactly about how there's so many assumptions that people bring with them, and they inherently think that it's smart because it got them to where they were in their success path. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, there's so much new stuff, and you've got the influences are so much greater than people give credit to, and that could be not having enough sleep or paying attention too much to your phone, where you simply don't realize how little you know, and that there's an in-between where you can be a successful entrepreneur and not be working 160 hours a week. There's you can actually slow down, and by slowing down, you're able to be more creative because you don't have that urgency part. But some people like that urgency part, and we used to call them procrastinators. Right now, they're starting. Adam's conversation TED Talk was about how he might have been judging procrastination too much because he's a precrastinator. He said he worries about things ahead of time.
Yeah, and we've gotten into this culture of doing. We just have to do all the time. But what we're really suffering, and it goes back to how it's impacting creativity and curiosity, is that we're not spending as much time thinking. And so, constantly doing and constantly being tethered and constantly just pushing ourselves, it does. I can tell you in the brain, and that's where I try to bring in a lot more neuroscience into the emotional intelligence conversation, just because we've learned so much more about the human brain than we ever knew, and it really impacts our ability. I think when we understand the brain better, it helps us in understanding why emotional intelligence is so critical. And that's why, we only have about 2 hours a day with our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's responsible for logical reasoning, cognitive analysis. And so, the rest of our brain is really leveraged by the limbic system, or the emotional centers of our brain, which is the unconscious part. And so that's why emotional intelligence is so critical, is because we're unconsciously being driven throughout our day and making choices throughout our day. And so that's where we want to take the unconscious and make it conscious. And so if we burn ourselves out, we can tell ourselves this lie that this is what's gotten us to where we are. But what we don't understand is that probably is not necessarily true. Sometimes it's dumb luck that got us there. And sometimes it's a lot of other factors. So you have to be careful about making those assumptions.
And I know you're familiar with StrengthsFinders, the assessment, and even the way a lot of other profiles are written, that people like to look at their strengths, and there's a whole philosophy out there to just build on your strength. And you brought, we talked about it briefly, but you brought up the six common derailers. That and just to give people a sense of how important that is. There was a quote you had: derailed managers cost their companies more than 150% of their annual salary. So you mentioned, one of the derailers was impulsivity. You also mentioned 5 others. Were they part of the study that you had, or were they just more in general?
They actually were measured in the study, but these are in general across the board, not just for the study. But yeah, so they're conflict avoidance, impulsivity, blame shifting, control, perfectionism, and power hunger.
Yeah, I mean, you see that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and again, I really disagree with positive psychology and only looking at your strengths, because the people that I work with, it's not their strengths that get in their way, or it's not their strengths that cause them to injure their career or get fired, or not get the promotion they were hoping for. It's almost always the derailers. And so that's just a piece of the self-awareness. We are humans, and we're a little bit messy, and we all have the potential to derail at some point. And the key is, though, if you know it, and you know what your triggers are, and you know where you potentially could derail, then you can actually do something about it, and you can put some structure in place. You can put some safeguards in place that will actually prevent you from derailing. And so it really enhances your self-awareness. And if you're not looking at that part of the equation, I will tell you, you're somewhat, I mean, I don't mean to be harsh, but it's somewhat delusional.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree with you. I mean, I've been doing it a long time as well. And people will say, but the report said they were an 87% fit. And I go, yeah, but they failed on the 13%. I mean, you can't ignore that part, and it depends on how serious that is. What the intensity of that derailer is. And, I think, Kerry, I don't know if you remember, I think we met after I was doing some training on it, but, using competencies. And I know the one which is pretty popular with is the Lominger competency model. And I think they had 80 or 90 competencies that people can develop. And then they had a list of 30 derailers. And it was, I always looked at the derailers because it was, that was when you described why somebody wasn't working, they always pointed to a derailer, and they never said, oh, they had these 9 good things and that was good enough. Right. They always looked at the one. Derailer. So I think that's really important. And if you just read the news, I mean, look at our whole political system of blame shifting. I think our whole societal conversation could be, improved dramatically if we got a little bit more emotional intelligence in Washington.
Yep.
Right. I would agree with that.
If we're waiting for Washington to give this country emotional intelligence, then
and conflict of gotten pretty close to the end here, Kerry. Is your book out yet? I mean, is it available yet? Or I can't remember when your publishing date was.
Yes, so it's out on Amazon right now on pre-order, and then it gets released June 28th.
Okay, and the title of that is Non-Obvious Guide to Emotional Intelligence by Kerry Goyette, Goyette. How else can listeners get in touch with you?
So you can reach us on our website at thinkapperio.com, ThinkApperio.com. I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn, and so you're welcome to reach out to me in that avenue as well.
Okay. Any final word of wisdom for our group? And I guess one of the things is, where could someone get started? If somebody says, I realize I need to I need to become more self-aware. I need to see, if I am who I am. What's the first step?
I would say the first step is to pick up a book on emotional intelligence. Again, hopefully my book, if not my book, another book. And then the best thing that you can do and put in practice right away is just start to ask for more feedback. So ask peers, ask your manager, ask your family members, what's one thing that you see that I could do to improve in whatever it is you want to improve in, X, Y, or Z. That has been shown consistently, not only with adults, but also in children, that when you get good critical feedback, that actually will increase your emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and another book I suggested, I know you wrote about this as well, which is Carol Dweck's book about fixed versus growth mindset. That's just eye-opening. That's just eye-opening. And by the way, it's her last name is Dweck. I know you can get it up on, you can read a little bit about it in Kerry's book. You can read about it in Recruiting in the Age of Googlization, which is my book, or you can read it in her full book, or where there's a lot of excerpts out there. But I would definitely look at that, because I think that's a good first step on recognizing why you might be tripping over your own 2 feet in getting there.
Right. I've recommended that book to so many of my leaders that have college-age kids, and they said it has completely changed their college students' perspective. And then even in, one of the universities now, based on my recommendation, has made her book required reading for all of their students coming in. So I highly recommend Carol Dweck's book.
Yeah. Kerry, can't thank you enough for joining us. Excited to have you, especially at the launch of your new book, especially in the pre-order stage. Wish you the best of luck. We need to continue to catch up, and your book's great, and I'm biased because it covered so many of the topics that I'm passionate about, and you did a great way to tie this in. Just fabulous. So good luck with it. Appreciate it.
Thank you both, and thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed being on your show.
Yeah, likewise. So Keith, there goes we got another episode under our belt almost. Yeah. Any closing words for today?
No, I think it just stands behind the idea that what really matters is how people are going through their lives. And the idea is that if you can help yourself do that in a happier way and help others, you're going to enjoy the way you go through life. You're going to enjoy your career path, no matter where you're starting now. If you just take a few moments, breathe, think about what feels good, move in that direction, and good things will happen to you.
Yeah, and I think we talked a lot about this for employees and leadership, but one of the common questions I get is, what should I develop, or what should I tell my kids to develop? What skills? And it's a broad umbrella, but emotional intelligence is a huge piece of that.
When I talk to the CEOs about life-work integration, I'm ultimately presenting the idea that you should help your employees develop self-awareness and happiness. Yep. Same thing, right?
Life-work integration.
Life-work integration. We're coming.
Good. Well, thanks again, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. We're always interested in hearing what you got on your mind. Let us know how you're doing. If you're interested in being a guest or a sponsor or just sharing a few thoughts, give us a call. Connect with us on LinkedIn. You can call each week at 561-623-9429. You can listen to a rebroadcast of this on any one of a number of platforms, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Amazon, Alexa, Roku, iHeart,
all of them.
Talk for podcasting.
It's great Windshield University time.
Yeah, absolutely. Until next week, Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, this is your host, Ira Wolf, and Keith Campagna. Don't let the shift hit your plans.